Well, I'm assuming that everybody can hear me, can hear my voice, can see my face. I just realized I need to trim this thing up here pretty soon. Good evening. I'm glad to see everybody this evening. Just for another episode, I guess, of what we're calling Head for the Hills. And yeah, somebody commented on my bright yellow shirt. It's a West Virginia Army National Guard shirt. Apparently, they want to see us coming. So, good evening, everybody. I trust everybody's doing okay. Yesterday was a pretty exciting day. Tonight, we're going to spend some time answering your questions again. We're going to finish up the Book of Esther. The other thing that we're going to also do is I'm going to actually ask that I'm going to solicit your go Navy. Solicit your opinions on what book we should do next. I prefer the Old Testament books, mainly because we are going through a New Testament book on Sunday mornings. And so I would prefer that we do an Old Testament, but I'm open to anything. And as I say this, I know that a lot of people, they typically will jump to wanting to do like a study of the book of Revelation and expect that I'm going to have all the answers for it. And we're going to solve whether or not we should be pre-tribbers, mid-tribbers, or post-tribbers. But even if we did want to do a study of the book of Revelation, I would actually have a start in the book of Daniel to get us some context and some flavor. So with all that, I'm going to also say that my partner in crime is missing. Not missing. I know where she's at. She's actually still finishing up work right now, and she's going to head on over, and hopefully we'll be able to catch up with her here in a few minutes. She's been working at Walmart for about 3 weeks now. I, for one, am really happy that she's started working. She was arranging the house, rearranging the house, and decorating the house, and getting mad at me when I would leave my shoes somewhere that they're not supposed to be. And so now she doesn't have to worry about that so much anymore. So I'm going to actually slow walk some of the questions that I was given tonight. And we might even go through all the way through the questions that were asked of me and Janie. And then we'll come back, wrap around after the study of Esther. And maybe by then, Janie will be here to connect with y'all as well. So let's get to the questions. It's been a busy couple of days for me. Between Monday and Tuesday, they've just been really super busy days. I cannot tell you that they were easy days. They were pretty challenging, but fun to watch. The first question that was asked of me is, what did I observe or learn about Huntingdon following the events that happened at the Blair building? And before I answer that question, let's just make certain that we keep the residents of the Blair building in our prayers. And I'm talking about this here in a minute or two. So excuse me. So I woke up yesterday morning, noticed that Shane Peachy had posted on Facebook already that day, and I woke up at 5. And I was a little surprised. Nothing against Shane, but I don't actually picture him being an early riser. So I was a little bit surprised by that, and that his post was dealing with the fire at the Blair house. And so when I got to the office shortly after 7, I was busy from essentially that point on. Started getting some phone calls about 7:30, and the thing that impressed me about this was a quick mobilization of God's people, not just our people at Huntingdon CMA, but the Orbezonia Free Methodist Church. Shane Peachy has a connection with them. They were going to have a spaghetti feed that they couldn't do because of COVID. So they donated a bunch of their spaghetti stuff. And I knew I was going to forget the name of the restaurant that donated 100 meals or so. If somebody remembers the name of that, I want to give them a shout out as well. Thanks for that. But the thing that was so impressive for me was the fast action, the quick to be mobilized. There wasn't a dragging of feet. And the ladies in the kitchen, at one point, they told me they cooked 7 pounds of spaghetti. That seems like a lot of spaghetti. So I find it amazing that uh, a town of our size can mobilize and feed um, truckload after truckload of people, and I'm impressed by that. The observation is that I would also say is that uh, the surrounding community coming together, gathering with each other to take in people who needed to be taken in, to all the way to Walmart getting, saying that people can come and get replacement clothing and toiletries. It's an amazing thing. And not only is it a testimony to the community, but it's really a testimony to God's people that we were the church in action. We were the hands and feet of Jesus, and we need to make certain that that is celebrated. So when the people of God's church are mobilized, there ain't nothing that we can't accomplish. So, how did the spaghetti dinner go for those impacted by the fire and for the first responders? I'm going to answer this probably a little bit differently, only because I didn't see a whole lot of the people that were given the food. I got to see our people and the Orbzonia Church working together, and that was an amazing thing. What I did do is I got to sit down and I got to hear Jean Bowie's story, and she was blessed by the meal. Don't get me wrong, but I sat down and I listened to her talk about how she lost everything, and it makes me think about the fact that most of these people, and let's be honest, most people of that age group don't do well with change. And this change was pushed on them suddenly without any warning and without their having any say, obviously, and they lost everything. And so it's just one more notch on the slow slog to losing independence. And it's going to be hard for a lot of them. It's going to be hard for probably all of them. Uh, the fact that you have age walking in and stealing some of your independence. Now, this is just a whole level. I think for me, listening to the stories of some of the residents is going to stick with me for a long time about the panic calls to relatives. I like Jean's story that there was a young man that she used to babysit for, who is a firefighter high up in one of the companies, who made it his mission to get her out, and that's awesome. So it's great that we're able to do this, but we got to keep them in prayer. Not only prayer for their spiritual recovery on this, but also for permanent housing for them. Hotel rooms and love seats can only go so far. So, um, as I mentioned on Sunday, Mother's Day can be difficult for some. I recently read a Facebook post from a mother who is struggling with an adult child that no longer wants to have a relationship. Are there any words of comfort or encouragement that I would offer? I can. Now, for many people, the idea of an adult child not wanting to have a relationship with mom or dad seems like something that you only see on TV or in the movies. Um, yeah. Thanks, Linda. Please continue to pray for them emotionally, the people of the Blair House fire. But so going back to this, the fact that we kind of get this idea, this romanticized picture of what happens in relationships, that some people will, you have a severed relationship with mom or dad, and then over the course of 2 hours in a movie, you reconnect and have, butterflies and roses in your relationship. Sadly, that's not the case in reality. When I think of stories of parents um, and child relationships, I often think of the prodigal son. And most of us are familiar with that story. If you're not, it can be found in Luke 15. Um, I'm not going to go into all the detail of that story, but what we do know is that the father had two sons. The younger son came to the father, and in essence, he said, "Dad, I wish you were dead," because he asked for his inheritance. The only time you really get your inheritance is actually after mom or dad die. But the young man went to his father and said, "Can I have my inheritance?" Now, to the listeners of that parable, when Jesus was originally telling that parable, the listeners would have been offended. They would have, clutched at their pearls and gasped and said, "How dare he?" In essence, the story begins with the younger son saying to dad, "I really wish you were dead." And now this is where I like to put on my imagination hat. I like to think through this. There's a couple of different pathways in front of this father. Now we know the one that Jesus talked about, but the other pathway that he could have taken legitimately is he could have said to his son, "No, you are an ungrateful little turd, and I'm not going to give you anything. Get back to the fields like your older brother. In fact, why can't you be more like him?" As I say those words, I think we can all agree that the relationship wouldn't stand the test of that situation, would it? I mean, the father would be well within his rights to respond that way, wouldn't he? But I'm also reminded of Paul's words that even though all things are permissible, not all things are profitable. So the father, perhaps reluctantly, gave the younger son his inheritance, and he watched him walk on down that road. So, how is that to encourage a mom whose adult children don't want a relationship? The postscript of the story is that the son went off to that distant land, spent all of his money, squandered it, was living a life that was atrocious. When he came to his senses, he came back home, and his dad welcomed him with open arms. He had to navigate, that younger son had to navigate that broken relationship on his own. And as hard as it is sometimes the best thing for the young person. Forcing a relationship is not going to help. Guilting your son or your daughter into having that relationship won't help. Perhaps this severed relationship is because of something that you've said or done or not said or done in the past, and you can't unring that bell. And that's hard. Maybe it's because you made choices in your life that force your kids to feel like they were playing second fiddle all the time. It's a hard lesson, I know. However, this is the encouragement. God is still working. And I can tell you my own story, and maybe I'll share that in the Zoom room after this. There is a pretty powerful story right now going on in my life personally that I don't mind to share, just not on social media like this. But I can tell you that God is still working. He knows the desires of your heart. He can and will redeem your relationships. Don't give up. Keep praying. Keep watching. God gives us a bit of an example in that prodigal son story. So I hope that helps. So before coming into the ministry, what types of work did I do? Did I find that any of these experiences equip me for what I'm doing now? If yes, how so? So I'm going to give you a list of my jobs. I began, aside from mowing lawns, my first job was working as a stocker at a local pharmacy that had kind of a little shop attached to it. So that was my job. I worked at a fish cannery for one shift, and that was the worst job ever. I worked as a Taco Bell type restaurant. I worked at Dairy Queen. I worked at Van Heusen's Men's Shirt. I worked in the Air Force. I worked as a bartender. I worked as a phone tech support for Gateway Computers. I helped run Washington State's largest nonprofit, a provider for people with disabilities. I'm in the Army Guard. I've also volunteered at nursing homes when I was in middle school. I also helped people with disabilities. I taught them how to ride horses. So have any of these experiences equipped me for being a pastor? Absolutely. I know a lot of people don't want to hear this, but sometimes in ministry, we have to make tough choices. Sometimes we have to make hard decisions in ministry. Sometimes we look at ministry and we say, well, we've always done it that way, and we should continue to do it that way. We feel as if there's this continuity from the past to the future that we have to maintain, even though that whatever it is that we're doing is no longer effective. And I know that we shouldn't sound so much like mercenaries when it comes to making decisions about ministries, but sometimes we have to have a tough conversation that says maybe we ought not be doing that ministry anymore. John Stumbo, the president of the Alliance in the United States, the Christian Missionary Alliance in the United States, I've read a quote of his one time where he said, anything that the Alliance does that advances the kingdom ought to be championed and resourced. Conversely, anything that does not advance the kingdom and ought to be questioned and maybe defunded. And so when it comes to making tough decisions, I actually am pretty good at that. I'm not great at patting your hand as we're telling you that we're no longer going to do that ministry. I will be the first to admit that. My concern is that we maintain a focus on why we are the church in the first place. Unfortunately, too often times I think in churches we think that we're here because we're a social club that comes together, much like the Rotary Club. Well, we already have a Rotary Club. Go be a part of that. Because the second thing that has really helped me is that I like to be on mission. I like to stay focused on our mission. I like to see our mission advancing, and our mission is Christ's mission. It's the best mission in the world. I like it because it reminds me of the fact that when everybody who either enlists or commissions into the military takes the same oath of either enlistment or commissioning, and that's to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That is the mission of. Don't care if you're a Marine, don't care if you're a Coast Guard, don't care if you're in the Navy or the Air Force or the Army, don't care if you're in the Army Guard, don't care if you're in the reserves. We all take that same oath of enlistment that says that is our mission. And to be missionally focused is what we ought to be doing in the churches. And too often, what ends up happening is that we'll sometimes get distracted by things that seem good, but they really don't add value to the advancement of the mission, the advancement of the kingdom. And so, if we can stay focused on the advancement of the kingdom, I once had an opportunity to I'm not going to share that. That's yeah, I won't share that. But anyways, so I think that if we can stay focused on our mission, most of the things that I've done actually have added value to what I currently do. I would say the one job that didn't add value to what I'm currently doing is working in the fish cannery, and I'll share in the Zoom room how that came about. So. So there's a question for Janie on here. My guess is she'll be home shortly. Let me check something here real quick. So for both of us, Indiana Jones has a fear of snakes. Are there any particular creatures that give you pause? And not pause spelled with P-A-W-S. I'm not a big fan of spiders. It's not that I'm afraid of them. I just don't like their spider web touching my face. Kind of creeps me out. But if I had to say what I actually despise, and I hope that there's nobody watching who falls into this category, I don't like clowns. This goes back even before the movie It came out. I've never even watched that movie, but I would just say I'm not afraid of them. I just find them creepy. What is my earliest childhood memory? When I was 2, I had a tumor that needed to be removed. I remember going in for the x-ray. I remember the little red light on the x-ray machine. I found out later on that the reason I probably remember this is it was pretty traumatic for me. I was scared, I was frightened, and my dad told me that they ended up having to tape my head to the table so that I would lay still long enough for them to give me an x-ray. Now that you've been in Huntingdon for a month, what has surprised you besides the pandemic? Well, I come back to the warmth and welcoming that the community has been for us. We're new in town, but I feel like we've been pretty welcomed. Yeah. Imagine there are now 25 hours in a day. How would you spend that extra hour? I'll be honest with you, sleeping. I am tired today. It's been a long week and we're only at Wednesday. So with that, I would say that Janie is probably on her way. Yep, she's in the burrow now. So anyways, let's go ahead and finish out Esther, and when she gets back, or when Janie gets here, we'll go ahead and transition over to hearing from her, answer her questions. So remember last week that Esther had finally told her about what her and her people's plight was. They were set to be slaughtered because of what Haman had done. The king left the room in a rage, and he came back in only to find that Haman was kind of on the couch, on the same sofa that Esther was on. And obviously appearances by that would be, that's not a good thing. So to somebody just walking in, that seemed to be a little aggressive. So the king's eunuchs threw a cloak over his head, over Haman's head, and marched him off to the gallows he'd erected to kill Mordecai on. So that brings us to the end of our journey with Esther. After Haman is hanged, all is right in the world, right? Well, not really. You see, the king seemed to be a bit of a weak king. He couldn't just say that thing doesn't happen anymore. Hey, here's my lovely bride. She's in the room. I'm going to keep finishing up Esther, and then we'll track back around to her questions. So he couldn't just say, "I can't undo what is," or he couldn't just go and undo what he had done. He said that whatever's been done in the king's name, signed with the king's signature, and sealed with my ring, can't be undone. And I just sit and I go, well, that seems kind of goofy. But what the king ended up doing is he gave Mordecai his signet ring and said, "Do what you would do." And so the edict said that Mordecai ended up doing his own edict, and he sent it to all the land. And essentially, he was giving the Jews a right to defend their life, liberty, and property. And but it also had a curious effect on people. In verse 17 of chapter 8, we read, "In each and every province, in each and every city, wherever the king's commandment and his decree arrived, there was gladness and joy for the Jews, a feast and a holiday. And many among the peoples of the land became Jews, for the dread of the Jews had fallen on them." Many people converted to Judaism. This is where I say the fingerprints of God are showing up again. What was going to be a horrible day for the Jews ended up becoming gain for the Jews. The Jewish nation was in exile. They had no rights really until this edict went out. It kind of reminds me of when the Jews were in Egypt and they were slaves. But rather than being a bad thing, it brought about an increase to the nation. This also reminds me that as a church, where there's persecution and struggle, there is an increase. There's a fascinating documentary on YouTube called Sheep Among Wolves. And I'm going to throw that out there as well. It's interesting because don't hear me that I want to be a martyr. Don't hear me say that I want there to be difficulties in the church. I like the fact that we live in a society and in a country where we are able to worship freely, except during COVID, but where the people around the church, where the governments and the people in power try to stop the growth of or the spread of the gospel, the church grows. So if you don't do it right now, but copy the links there. One for the Zoom room, the other for the documentary called Sheep Among Wolves, and it's part 2. I don't know what part 1 is, but part 2, it begins by asking the question, what if I told you that the mosques in Iran were empty? And in essence, the fastest growing church in the world today is found in Iran. It's an underground movement of house churches, many of them being headed up by women, but it's growing exponentially, and I would encourage you to watch it. But the end of Esther is really curious, though. We now see, this is the institution of, I think, if I could be so crass, is the first drinking game. If you follow along, you're going to read that the Jews are saved. There's a second day where they are able to go out and fight and take the spoils of war and defend their land themselves. And then they have this big feast, and they call it Purim. Today, during Purim, the goal is to read through the book of Esther, and anytime Mordecai's name is mentioned, or not Mordecai, well, Mordecai's name, everybody cheers. Esther's name is mentioned, everybody cheers. Anytime Haman's name is mentioned, everybody boos and drinks. And so it's an interesting thing that happened, that where God's fingerprints are all through it. All of a sudden, now you have this festival that wasn't mandated by God, that today is probably a little bit debauched, which kind of mirrors the opening of the book of Esther. But Esther is a fantastic book that helps us to remember a few key points. Number one, God will bless those who bless Israel and curse those who curse Israel. That has been a thing. That was a promise that that God gave to Abraham, and that's still a thing today. I can't tell you anything beyond we got to be in prayer for our Israel. And by the way, the church is not Israel. For those who might believe that, I just want to not necessarily poke you with that. We are not Israel. God is active and working, often behind the scenes, even when we don't see it. We got to remember that God is still active and doing things today. He's doing things in your life. He's doing things in your church. He's doing things in your community, and we need to rejoice in that. He's doing things in your relationships, and you may not see it. There are things going on under the surface of your family members that you wouldn't even believe. You wouldn't even it would surprise you what's going on. So there's that. And then number three, for the church, even when it seems like dark times are approaching, that is often when the season for gain is at hand. So as the song goes, let's praise him in the storm. Right now, we're sitting here under quarantine, not able to hug and not able to shake hands, can't greet each other with a holy kiss. Still find that kind of a weird thing. I don't think I would ever embrace that. But when it feels like it's the darkest, God is ready to break through. And we have to be ready for that. We need to be on the look for that. We can't just sit back and go, oh, well, that's all we can do, because there's more to life than that. So anyways, I'm going to actually turn over to my wife now. I'm going to have her scooch over into here and answer your questions.
Hi. So I actually logged in and I listened to you the whole time. I don't actually think you can say the word turd.
Well, you just
I don't
did.
know. Put in the chat whether or not it's okay for your pastor to say that word or not. I don't know. Anyway, do you want to feed me the questions and I'll answer?
I'll read the questions to you. How's your new job going, Janie?
Whew, it is busy and it's good and I'm learning and I'm enjoying it.
When did you first become a pharmacy tech, and what led you to this field?
So I have 6 years of experience, worked at Kmart Pharmacy in West Virginia, worked at the medicine shop in Ohio, and a family-owned business in Ohio called Ritzman Pharmacy. I actually had no intention of being in pharmacy. I was working at Kmart in the office as the office manager. And 9 months later, there was an opening and they just asked if I wanted to transfer over. So I really enjoy learning new skills. And so I thought I would try it out. So
cool. All right. So this was asked of both of us. Indiana Jones has a fear of snakes. Mm-hmm. What creature gives you some sort of trepidation?
Yeah, I'm sure you know. Okay, so all you parents out there, do not rent the movie Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds and let your 6-year-old watch it. I have no idea why my mother thought that was okay, but from the age of 6, I have been deathly afraid of birds. Everything from ladybugs and insects all the way up to big flying birds. So, yeah, don't like them.
Yeah, so here's my fear of answering this question, actually, is that I'm one of those people. Never mind, I'm not going to say that because I'm going to actually ask you guys who tune into the Zoom room this question. Anyways, what's your earliest childhood memory?
I was probably 5. We lived in this old house. We called it the White House. It was a really rundown but huge white house. And the rule was we didn't go upstairs. It was just kind of not used. Well, my 2 sisters and I decided to walk up the creaky stairs and open up the door because we didn't know what was behind it. And the handle, oh my gosh. The handle actually fell off. He's terrible. Sorry, guys. And we went running down the stairs. So we lived in this house and I never knew what was upstairs behind that door. Again, I was like 5 or 6. I was really traumatized as a kid. And then my husband, so.
So now that you've been in Huntingdon for a month, what has surprised you besides the pandemic?
It's bigger than I thought. I actually thought when we came and candidated, actually, ironically, things were open then too. But the more you guys share with us, like different places to go and see, and just walking around, it's bigger than I thought. So,
Yeah. I like this question. Imagine there are now 25 hours in a day, 25 hours in a day. How would you spend that extra hour?
I feel like I have too much time on my hands. So I actually wouldn't want another hour. Because I would just probably work another hour.
Yeah.
So
I said sleep.
Yeah, I heard you.
Yeah, sleep. Anyways, that brings us to the end of our journey this evening. Our journey through Esther is complete. The only vote that I saw on here was to do Nehemiah, I thought. I saw that on here. It looks like somebody retracted it. So, but I'm always open for suggestions on studies. I like doing the Old Testament because we're doing the New on Sunday mornings. So if you could shoot me an email. Again, my email is robhill@huntingdoncma.org. And we'll roll with whatever we come up with. But don't text me 5 minutes beforehand and say you want to do this, whatever this is, and be mad if I don't do it. I don't like to show up to these things ill prepared. So with that, let me pray for those that aren't going to stick around for the Zoom room. But make certain there's probably going to be a link put on Facebook, our Facebook page, to that documentary. I would seriously encourage you to look at that documentary. It's about 2 hours in length. It's well worth the watch. It's encouraging. It shows that God is still working and active today. Let me pray. Father God, thank you for those that have tuned in and watched me babble tonight. My prayer is that the encouragement for those that are struggling with relationships, that they give it to you. We call you our Father, and we oftentimes we get goofed up on our picture of who you are, because sometimes our earthly fathers are a bit goofy. And so would you just remind us of who you truly are, that your character is of a good father, that you are perfect in your love, that you are perfect in your ways, you're perfect in your discipline even of us. And so when we struggle with relationships, remind us that there is a pathway forward. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's easy, sometimes it surprises you, but ultimately we want to give you the glory in repaired relationships. We do pray for the residents of the Blair house. Emotionally, they're shocked, they're racked, they're in many ways they're wrecked. But we know that you have grace that is sufficient even for them. And so, would you just? I'm convinced that not everybody in that place is a Christ follower. May our actions reflect so well upon you, Jesus, that those that don't know you wouldn't think of using your name other than as at the end of a cuss. Would you just bless them and draw them to you? Yeah, let us be your hands and feet. Would you undertake for this community a new thing and reveal it to us in your time? We thank you and we praise you. In Jesus' name we do pray. Amen. All right. Well, I'm going to sign off here and I'm going to head over to the Zoom room. I don't know why I said I'm going to head over. I'm going to still be sitting here. Anyways, I look forward to seeing you guys there.